It's Father's Day weekend, 1969. The Martin family, William and his two sons, Dennis and Douglas, and their grandfather, had planned an adventurous trip to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Now, it was their family tradition, a way to escape the everyday grind and embrace the peace and beauty of the wilderness. The park stretched as far as the eye could see, with towering trees that blotted out the sun and trails that wound through thick, untouched forests. Now, the Martins made their way to Spencfield, a grass highland clearing surrounded by rugged terrain. And the air was fresh, the sun's warm, and the scent of pine needles filled their senses as they set up the camp. The boys, Dennis and Douglas, were eager to play, laughing as they darted between trees. But this weekend would begin as a peaceful escape would soon spiral into a chilling, unsolved mystery, one that still haunts the Smoky Mountains today. So on the afternoon of June 14th, Dennis and Douglas decided to play hide-and-seek near their campsite, with Dennis determined to outsmart his older brother and father. His plan was simple. He would sneak behind the thick brush, crouch low, and wait for just the right moment to leap out and surprise them. Dennis, the youngest in the family, he was small, quick, and clever. So as he darted into the woods, his father kept an eye on him, at least at first. So minutes passed, then more minutes passed. William Martin called for his son, expecting him to jump out from the bushes, laughing at his successful trick, but there was no reply. His voice grew louder, more anxious as the seconds ticked by. "Dennis! Dennis!" Still nothing. Panic began to set in, right? He and Clyde, the boy's grandfather, frantically searched the nearby woods. They yelled for Dennis, combed through the brush, expecting at any moment to see his bright red shirt pop up from behind a tree. But the forest offered only silence. Dennis was gone. As the hours passed and the light began to fade, the search grew larger. Park rangers, hikers, and volunteers scoured the dense wilderness. They called Dennis's name, retracing his steps, desperate to find any trace of him. Now the night fell, cold and dark, and the Smoky Mountains, so inviting just hours before, now felt like an as endless, suffocating labyrinth. By the next morning, the search turned into one of the most extensive rescue operations in the park's history. Helicopters hovered above, bloodhounds sniffed through the underbrush, and the number of searchers swelled to over 1,400. But the deeper they went into the wilderness, the more the forest seemed to resist giving up its secrets. There was no footprints, no clothing, not a single sign that Dennis had been there at all. Then came a chilling report, a sighting that would cast an eerie shadow over the entire investigation. Just a few miles away, near Rowan's Creek, another family had been out hiking the same day Dennis vanished. The Key family, unaware of the ongoing search, had taken a secluded trail when their young son noticed something unusual. He tugged at his father's sleeve and pointed towards the tree line. At first glance, it seemed like a man moving quickly through the thick woods, but something was off. This figure, it was tall, unkempt, and wild-looking, and most disturbingly, it appeared to be carrying something small and limp over its shoulder. The figure moved fast, too fast for someone casually just hiking. It almost seemed as though it was fleeing from something. The Key family thought little of it at the time. They assumed it was just a strange encounter, perhaps a hunter or a recluse who lived deep in the mountains. But as they later heard about Dennis's disappearance, their casual encounter took on a far more sinister tone. Could it be that the figure they had seen was carrying Dennis Martin? When the Keys reported this sighting, searchers immediately followed the lead, combing the area where the figure had been spotted. But just like everywhere else, the dense, shadowy woods revealed nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, no trace of the mysterious figure or Dennis. For days, search teams poured through over the section of the park, their focus now sharpened on the possibility that Dennis had possibly was taken. Yet, the figure, described as both fast and ghost-like in its movement, seemed to have vanished just as mysteriously as Dennis had. But there was something even more unnerving about this lead. Locals, as well as some seasoned park rangers, whispered about the Smoky Mountains harboring more than just wildlife. There were rumors, half-forgotten tales, passed down over generations in this area about feral men living deep within the mountains. People had long abandoned society and survived by any means necessary. They moved unseen, knew the land like the back of their hand, and avoided outsiders at all costs. Was the figure seen by the Key family one of these so-called wild men? And if so, what did they want with a 6-year-old boy? The investigation shifted. drawing in more law enforcement, including the FBI. They looked into every possible angle, including the possibility of an abduction. But the wild man theory, while chilling, was never proven. There was no evidence of anyone else living in those mountains, and no one came forward with further sightings of the strange figure. Weeks passed. The search continued, but hope began to fade. Helicopters left, search parties dwindled, and the reality began to sink in. Dennis Martin was gone, and no one knew where or why. Over the years, the disappearance of Dennis Lloyd Martin has remained one of the most haunting mysteries in American history. The official explanation suggests that Dennis simply wandered off in some cone to the unforgiving wilderness. But others believe that something far more sinister took place that day in 1969. Whether it was the work of a deranged hermit, a shadowy figure fleeing with his tiny body, or something darker lurking in the remote corners of the Great Smoky Mountains. One thing remains clear though, the mountains hold their secrets tight, and Dennis Martin became one of them. As hikers and visitors make their way through the same trails today, there are whispers, quiet murmurs that perhaps, just perhaps, the figure seen by the Key family still roams the woods today, hidden in the shadows, possibly waiting for you. That'll do it for today's story. If you enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you.